Okay, if I could have your attention, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Carla, if you would please call roll.
Mark Arnold.
Here.
Whitney Hall.
Here.
Marvin Kusick.
Here.
Eddie Mack.
Here.
David Mason.
Here.
Paul Green.
Here.
Don Roberts.
Here.
James Simonek. David Trojan.
Here.
Jonathan Waddell.
Here.
That's a quorum.
Thank you, Carla. And if I'm not mistaken, this is our supermajority that we've been waiting on. First item on the agenda is to consider approval of the minutes of the regular Metropolitan Area Planning Commission meeting of October 15th. I'm going to break it up into two. So if you would all take a look at the first set of minutes, we'll approve those, and then we'll do the second set.
I'll make a motion to approve those.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the October 15th meeting. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And that motion carries. And then the second set of minutes are for the special meeting of October 29, 2018. Again, if you would take a look at
Motion
those.
to approve.
I would like to propose an amendment. I spoke earlier. I would like to state for the reason that I announced that I would be abstaining from the vote on the Atwood Swad Lake tract, that I excused myself and returned after that.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion with an amendment and a second, right? All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And that motion carries. And item number 3 is administration. We have an update for the January and February regular meeting dates. Chris?
Yes, they're in front of you. There always meets on the third Monday of every month, with the exception of January and February, and the proposal is to meet on the fourth Monday of those 2 months. We just need a motion from the Planning Commission to accept those dates.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the change in the schedule. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? And that motion carries. Okay, the next item is to consider approval of the preliminary plat of the Chisholm Ranch, being part of the Southeast Quarter and Southwest Quarter, Section 14, Township 23 North, Range 7 west of the Indian Meridian, Garfield County, Oklahoma. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. The tract of land is outlined in yellow on the screen in front of you. To the left is Oakwood Road. Just on the other side, west of Oakwood Road, is the Chisholm High School, if that helps orient you where we're at. It is just outside the city limits. Along the bottom of the slide, you'll see the red line. That represents the Enid city limit line. The next picture, this is now, the orientation has changed, but it basically has, you know, this narrow piece that abuts 45. So this slide here, now this is Highway 45 right here. So north is now to your right. Shows you the interior roads and the lot configurations. The proposed plat has 65 lots. The road systems will be concrete curb and gutter with paved asphalts, and it's their intent to make those public. The water supply and the sanitary sewer will be private for each lot. There will be a private water well and a septic tank per lot. The only issue Fire Marshal will address here in just a moment is this particular subdivision is only served by one access in and one access out. Are there any questions of me before I turn it over to the Fire Marshal? Thank you.
Good evening. The issue in question here is I was asked to review this plat in reference to its compliance with the International Fire Code, which is adopted by the city of Enid. That's also a minimum fire code for the state of Oklahoma that we kind of adopt in concert with the state. One minor difference between our adoption of the International Fire Code and the way the state adopts it is that there are a group of appendices at the back of the book that pertain to fire protection water supplies, fire apparatus access in this particular case. The city of Enid does adopt those appendices as well by my recommendation. So the state does not adopt the appendices, but the city of Enid does. The issue here is also addressed somewhat in Chapter 5 of the International Fire Code under Fire Service Features. Section 503 refers to fire apparatus access roads, determines where they're required, minimum construction standards, widths, and things like that for turning radiuses of trucks. But it's pretty general. The reason we also adopt the appendix pertaining to that is it gives a little bit better definition of some guidelines. That whole section, Appendix D, refers to fire apparatus access roads, gives some additional minimum specification, and it has a section for, it's section D107, one or two family residential developments. And it reads, one or two family dwelling residential developments that have, where the number of dwelling units exceeds 30 shall be provided with two separate and approved fire apparatus access roads. There are a couple of exceptions, the first of which is that if all of the homes in that development have automatic fire sprinkler systems, you can allow just a single fire apparatus access road. I know nobody really wants to go there. Exception number 2, the number of dwelling units in a single fire apparatus access road shall not be increased unless fire apparatus access roads will connect with future development as determined by the fire code official. In this particular development, because of the configuration of it, the shape of the parcel that they're building on, they really don't have an opportunity to put a second fire apparatus access road. Now, they have indicated in the current drawing that's on the screen now, across the very bottom of the screen, which is on the east side of the property, they extended that road up across the north to the back side of those parcels, and they were proposing a secondary fire apparatus access road running along the backside of those properties. It wouldn't be open to the public, is my understanding. It would just be available for fire apparatus access. That's really the best they can do with the shape of this property and the configuration of the parcel. It still doesn't fully meet the requirement because section D107.2 refers to remoteness. Where two fire apparatus access roads are required, they shall be placed a distance apart equal to not less than 1/2 the length of the maximum overall diagonal dimension of the property or area to be served, measured in a straight line between accesses. So basically it's saying they need to be remote from one another, separated to the extent that if one of them's compromised, they're not both compromised for some reason. This text of the code includes some commentary that has a little bit more language in reference to that. It says the concept is similar to the one dealing with the remoteness of exits in a building in section 1007.1. One of the primary reasons for multiple access roads is to ensure that if one access road is blocked or otherwise unavailable, another will allow access by the fire department. Therefore, when more than one access road is required, these roads must be separated by enough distance to avoid a situation where both would be blocked or unavailable simply because they're too close to one another. So if this development were within the city limits of the city of Enid, I'd certainly be recommending against approval of it. We have developments in town where we have that issue currently and would like to be able to correct that. Cedar Ridge, for example, there's one way into that development and one way out off of Garland Road. A number of homes in there, if that access is compromised for some reason, we don't have a way to get trucks in there. Or if we have trucks in there and it becomes compromised, we don't have a way to get them out to respond to something else. This, because it's outside of the city limits, I'm really just making recommendations or basically just telling you how it does or does not comply with the fire code. I don't have the authority or the jurisdiction to say that they can or can't do that there. That's up to you folks and I guess the county commissioners. So can I answer any questions?
Do you know what utility water are served with?
It'll be private, Commissioner, be private water
Private
wells.
wells.
Each homeowner will have their own well and their own septic.
support sprinklers, okay.
And if this were in the city limits, we would also have to require a fire protection water supply, have a distribution of water lines and hydrants there as well. But outside of the city limits, of course, that's not an issue. So,
Chief, I've got a question, and you may not be the one to answer, but the additional road on the east side you mentioned, just behind all the lots,
yes, sir.
would that be a hard surface road that matched everything else?
Is that what you gentlemen were proposing there, or do you know?
It would just be a 20-foot asphalt to meet your requirements.
Okay. I mean, for it to be acceptable at all, we would have to require that it be suitable for fire apparatus, that it's graded, compacted. It could be a gravel if it was maintained. I think they're proposing an asphalt. So, I mean, as long as it was sufficient to carry our apparatus and maintained that way, we would be satisfied with it. The issue here is it just doesn't meet that remoteness requirement. And without acquisition of additional property, which would give them access, either through Longhorn Estates or across the north side of Longhorn Estates back over towards Oakwood Road, something of that nature, there's really not a way to do it with the property that they currently have. So,
You may not know this, the property adjacent to the east, is that owned by the same developer, so you have an easement to? So,
Or not even developer, different property owner.
so it's a separate easement that you'll have to acquire for those purposes?
Well, we just, to the east. Can you
It's a pointer, Ken, to be clear on, 'cause this map is turned, so.
Let's back it up, all right.
the alternate access that they're proposing is just here
Oh, I
across the
see.
backside of these parcels.
I see.
So it's within their property line,
I see.
but they've just taken part of the back lots of that row of
Okay,
parcels.
so
You're stepping
to provide that.
fit it in right here.
Their original plan didn't have this little stub here.
Right.
It's kind of looped around, but they provided that to give
Yeah,
access
it's
to
right here.
this secondary access across the back
I
of the
see.
properties.
Okay, that makes a difference.
Yeah.
Where's the closest fire hydrant then for you to get water?
The nearest hydrant is there at the corner of Oakwood and Carrier Road. I believe it's the
By the school, right?
catty-cornered from the school.
Okay.
That hydrant would be on this. And there are additional hydrants being put in over by the school now because of an expansion there. So they may have a closer hydrant after those are put in place. Currently, the closest one is on the southeast corner of the intersection, I believe.
So if I understood correctly, even with that road on the east side, it wouldn't meet the standards or the regulations of the distance the two roads have to be apart, is that right?
That's the issue.
It has to be the diagonal length of the property, half of that.
Yes, sir.
Well, and regardless, right now you don't have an access to a plug. Is that correct? Like you would be running, it looks like there's at least 5 adjacent properties if you stayed in the Longhorn Estates or the length of somebody's field. If you went north to access the Oakwood and Carrier intersection?
You'd be supplying the water with water trucks.
Yeah, in this particular situation, we would probably automatically respond with a tanker. If we needed additional water, we'd probably be filling the tanker at that intersection. It's really too far to lay a large diameter hose into that development, probably. But we automatically respond within 3 miles of the city limits. We have lots of areas that are outside of our developed infrastructure. We have lots of areas that we respond to that we don't have a fire protection water supply. And there's really not much we can do about it other than respond with what we've got available. So that affects their insurance rates and things like that. But in this particular case, really just providing my evaluation of how it compares with the fire code as it's written, so.
This fire go through there and it's all.
Since we have the folks here, okay.
Ready?
Any other questions for me, sir?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Does anybody have any more questions? Yeah, I think
We do have two gentlemen signed up. One is David Box and Tyler Muncy. If I said that correct?
Good evening, David Box, 522 Colcord Drive in Oklahoma City, here on behalf of the applicant with Mr. Musney. Don't disagree with the way the fire code is written or how it's been interpreted to you. I do, however, want to point out the problem that is created with the new appendices and how distance is measured. When you have a unique parcel like this in which you have a panhandle, you're almost automatically excluded from having a secondary access point. It is worth noting, though, that, and again, this is oriented incorrectly, but on the bottom of your page, which is our eastern line, we do stub out. So there is a secondary future access point. It's also worth noting that we have divided our boulevard entry so that you essentially have two separate entry points. Other jurisdictions around do count that as 2 points of access, under the idea that if one is blocked, the other one then remains open. So with those two, plus the third that will provide along our frontage there in what would have been the backyards, we do think we meet the spirit and intent of what the appendices was trying to get to. Otherwise, we essentially have a piece of property based upon this new adoption that becomes incredibly difficult to develop, consistent with its current zoning. What you have before you complies with all of the zoning requirements, subdivision regulations. It is this appendices that is creating this problem. So we would ask that you recommend approval of this. We do believe that we meet the spirit and intent with the multiple points of access, and again, our access to the east, once the land to our east is developed out. So we'd ask for that consideration. But happy to answer any questions. Mr. Musney is the civil engineer on the project, if you have any questions related to that.
I think you mentioned earlier that the property to the east is currently owned by another developer?
Correct.
And have you heard if there's any intent to develop that in the near future?
I'm not sure at this point.
One of the things you relate to city staff or somebody had is your efforts to connect in Longhorn Estates.
That's right. We did attempt.
Issues and challenges there too.
Right.
That might be useful to.
Yeah, so we did try to get an easement to our west. It is already developed and built out, so that presented some challenges. It would have been going through somebody's yard or side yard, presumably. But we did make every effort possible to try to find another access point that would meet that diagonal distance measuring requirement that, again, is creating a host of problems, not just here, but in other places. Mr. Musney and I are involved in a similar situation in the city of Edmond, in which we had to file suit to try to get to a resolution, because the way that the measurement requirement works is incredibly punitive when you have a unique parcel. It's as if this was designed believing that all parcels are squares, and therefore it'll be easy to come up with enough distance to have multiple access points. But as we all know, there are unique parcels in Oklahoma, and things get split off for various reasons. And when you do that, and you have a panhandle shape like this, it creates problems. So we believe, though, that we have the necessary points of ingress and egress to meet the concerns that are espoused in the appendices, and therefore would ask for some consideration. Yes, sir.
The electrical services be buried?
I think that'd be up to the electric company. I would assume so.
What communications have been made with the owner of the property kind of on the southwest portion that owns that block, that blocks access to Carrier?
Just got to change the picture for him. Oops. Didn't mean to do that. There we go.
Yes.
That help you, Commissioner?
Yes, so from Carrier up to the south side of the main portion of the property.
There you go, red dot. There you go.
You talking about here?
Correct, mainly like down the side of Longhorn Estates, but
I mean, honestly, I think he's looking to hold on to that parcel and develop it in the, I wouldn't say near future, but in the future.
We've tried, but there's just been no effort or response. I believe we've contacted, it was this parcel and this parcel to try to get a stub from the west. And same thing, we actually did get some response, but they just weren't interested.
Those are vacant, unbuilt lots, those two.
No, I think this is an old aerial. I think there's homes on both of them.
Oh, there are.
So let me get this straight. There is planned to be another access from the northeast corner down the side of the panhandle to the Carrier Blacktop,
Yes,
even though it's not drawn in here.
that's right. The plat reflects the easement. So you'll
See
really
the
have
easement,
3 drives.
right.
You'll have the boulevard entry and then the one that you just described. And this is not a condition that is uncommon. We were able to find multiple neighborhoods in which there were single points of access serving more than 30 lots within Enid. This one has more than one access point, but it would have failed the separation requirements, and it's fairly dense. But a quick search, we found multiple neighborhoods that are in the same position, having one except theirs are square, more square than ours. So it's not an uncommon condition.
Point out where the school is on there?
The school would be
All those other lots in that southwest are vacant right now?
I think this aerial's like 2 years old, so I think it's filled in a little bit more than that.
This issue obviously go to council, and does it also need to clear county commissioners?
Yeah, right.
What happens after us?
It goes to Garfield County Commissioners. It's in their jurisdiction. If the plat was inside the city limits, then it would go to the city commission.
So this will not go to city commission?
No, sir.
Okay.
And to your all's knowledge, the Longhorn Estates are set up the same way, that it's private water and sewer for all of them?
Yes.
I've got one more question for the chief, if that's okay. If you had a 45-mile-an-hour wind, like we almost always do, out of the west, and there was a grass fire come across there and caught that panhandle on fire, those houses, could you get down that access road? How much space do you need from a fire or multiple fire?
What they've proposed as far as width for us is acceptable. I mean, the width surface they're proposing is fine. We don't have an issue with the roadway that they're providing for us or that access easement. The condition of what they've put on their plan, what they're proposing to do, I think would be acceptable, and we could get back in there. We probably wouldn't be taking fire engines down that apparatus access road for a grass fire. We would be using brush rigs, which are basically 1-ton trucks. But yeah, the roadway they're proposing is not the issue. The only real issue, the only place that they really have a hard time complying completely with the fire code requirement is that remoteness issue, having that access appropriately distant from the main access.
I've got one more question for you, sir, or either one of you. What's the average size of that lot, of those lots? There's a number of lots, I think we said around 60, is that correct?
Correct. The minimum is 3/4 an acre. The largest is probably 1.25 acres, averaging roughly an acre.
Okay. Thank you.
Or not, where the code talks about requiring 2 accesses is in excess of 30. I think what we have here proposed 65 lots. Is that correct?
If you were to have a fire, for instance, and the roadway was blocked, but in this case, we're discussing 3/4 acre lots, and I believe if you were to look at Longhorn Estates, for instance, and the way their houses are situated on there, would you knock over somebody's fence to be able to access fire, to prevent it from spouting, or?
Most of the time have concerns about getting a truck stuck if we're going on a surface that wasn't intended for fire apparatus. Our trucks are extremely heavy.
Yes.
They carry so much water. So we don't take them off of a hard surface.
At all?
Hardly ever.
Okay.
It's just too easy to get them buried in the mud, so.
Any more questions? Do we have a motion?
Is there any requirement at this point for us to approve these? Because both the drawing on this item and the following item, to me, I really just am not seeing the
They're
roadway
identical.
drawn
They are
in there.
identical.
Yeah.
One's a preliminary, and the next item is the final plat. In most cases, you will look at a preliminary plat, and then the final plat will come at a later date, and it may be less than 65 lots. In this case, it's the same.
Correct, but I'm still not seeing, I mean, it looks like maybe there's an easement down the side of the drawing, but it, to me, doesn't really show that there would be a roadway.
I've turned I've turned it this way, which would orient it properly. This strip between the border line, it's still partially filled in, I would assume.
Yeah. Well, and on the next item, there's it, where it's broken out into two, like the panhandle and then the rest being split, it's much easier to see. There is 100-foot width or 150, but it looks like it's going the length of the property, but I'm not seeing.
So on the plat, it does show that it's labeled as a 20-foot access easement. And one of the ways to handle perhaps what your concern is require a plat note in terms of the surface requirements within that 20-foot easement, which we would be fine with. But it is properly labeled as a 20-foot access easement that runs the length until it gets to the street.
Is your intent to actually build that road too and have
Teenagers up and down.
Get their dirt bikes out.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
It is small print.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to look at.
That's what I was trying to read.
Is everybody there? I can point it out to you. Good?
And is there any kind of way of securing that to make sure that, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily want somebody racing down the street right behind my house like that. But.
Pretty sure that's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to be a great place.
We can put I mean, it can be a gate only accessible by fire.
And that's acceptable to us.
We did a crash gate over, excuse me, off of the Marriott Spring Hill Suites. There's actually is an access gate that the fire department can only use, and so that's kept any kind of shenanigans from taking place back behind there, so.
Stonebridge Apartments on Cleveland, they had a similar issue there. It was a separate section of the appendices that dealt with multifamily dwellings, but they had to have a secondary access there as well. And it's to the north of the main access, and it was gated as well. So, I mean, that we're okay with that. It just has to be available for us, not necessarily for the public, so.
Have you had to use that yet?
No.
Guys, I'm looking for a motion.
I move we approve it. As submitted.
With the plat note.
Yes, with the plat note that would require the easement. Who's going to maintain that roadway?
That'll be a discussion they'll have to have with the Garfield County Commissioners.
fund that with surplus funding.
Okay, so at this moment, I have a motion from Commissioner Trojan to approve. Do I have a second? I'll second. I have a motion and a second to approve. All those in favor, well, do we want to do a roll call?
Do a show of hands,
Show of hands?
please.
Okay. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Six. Those opposed, raise your right hand. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Bear with me a second, and we'll get to the next item. The second part of this is to consider a recommendation to the Garfield County Board of Commissioners for the final plat of Chisholm Ranch being part of the southeast quarter and southwest quarter, Section 14, Township 23 North, excuse me, Range 7 west of the Indian Meridian, Garfield County, Oklahoma.
This is a companion item to the one you just voted on.
Based on that, Mr. Chair, I move to approve.
I have a motion to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the final plat. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, I have
Just one?
one nay.
Nay.
Two nays.
Two nays.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Three nays.
Same, sorry, I should have done. Show of hands.
Thank you.
Okay,
So it's the same.
same.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're getting to what we've been trying to get done for the last couple of months. Sidewalk variances. Consider a request for a variance to the City of Enid, Ordinance 1061, sidewalks required for property located at 939 Sooner Trend Road.
Thank you, Chairman, Commissioners. Yes, this is a request we received for variance in the sidewalk ordinance for the address, as you mentioned, at 939 Sooner Trend Road, which is an industrial zoned area. The site has developed or added to their 60 by 40 foot building, and the ordinance requires, standard ordinance requires place a sidewalk at the property. In your package, you may see that we provide the location map and the information that shows the street in front of the site, which is basically a standard curb and gutter street, and they set off about 11.5 feet off of the right-of-way. They requested a variance basically because there's no sidewalks in the area and it's industrial zoned.
There's also, really the only house around there is the original homestead that Enid Energy Center was cut out of that farm, so. And there is one house that's quite a ways east of there, so we really have no residential
It's
foot
industrial, looks
traffic.
like.
It's an industrial park, so.
Okay.
Motion to approve the variance.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the variance. All those in favor? Aye. Aye. Those opposed? Looks like that was unanimous.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, the second one is consider a request for a variance to the City of Enid Ordinance 1061, sidewalks required for a property located at 3005 South Van Buren Street.
Thank you,
Robert?
Chairman and Commissioners. This is a property that is on South Van Buren. It is Klein Signs property. They have made improvement there, sidewalks required. They've requested a variance in the sidewalk ordinance, basically because of facilities or structures that may interfere with the construction of sidewalks. There it is.
Yeah.
There you go, sir. Thank you. Site location on South Van Buren. And this, you can see the property just to the right of the photo here, and this is where a sidewalk would go. There is a light pole and water meter in that area, but sidewalks can be constructed around those, so they're not necessarily the main issue of obstruction. Sidewalks do vary at time to time to get around obstructions. It would probably most likely require the reconstruction of the two driveways, to provide the proper grade across the sidewalk or grade across the driveway for a sidewalk, you'd have to flatten these areas out close to the property line, so it probably would require the reconstruction of those driveways, probably most of the driveways. They request a variance for that reason.
Okay, thank you, Robert.
And so if they put the sidewalk around the meter and the pole, that still meets the requirement from the road?
Yes, there is no particular requirement. Sometimes sidewalks will butt up against a curb. It's best to, we try to move them as far away from traffic as possible, but there are times when that's not possible.
Can you navigate the sidewalk if you, I mean, if I'm understanding what you're asking, are we putting the sidewalk right where the pole is? Is the pole going to be in the middle of the sidewalk?
The sidewalk would meander around the pole if it was put in there, Commissioner. The standard is to put it 1 foot off. We try to put it 1 foot off of the right-of-way to keep it clear from the street, which would be out in this area and in this area right here. But when you have obstructions, then the sidewalk would have to meander around that obstruction to still provide for its use.
Here's the only other sidewalks in the area are on the west side of the road. Like there's a little bit of an image. One of the pictures. Yeah,
No,
you can
that's,
barely see it at the top end. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think there is sidewalks in that area. Commissioner.
Across the street to the south.
Excuse me?
Sidewalk.
They put the sidewalk in. Of course, we also have an odd approach into this property. You have the road and it goes up and then kind of down into, because further to
Correct.
the.
Standard for driveways, which they've complied with here, is to bring their driveway up to keep, of course, to keep the stormwater into the road surface and then bring it down to meet the surface. Or in his case, they go down because of the road surface.
Sorry.
Yeah, so placing a sidewalk through here would require this area to be level, so it would require probably reconstruction of that driveway and put a little more slope on the backside to
So we're
make
going
it work.
to have,
Yep, run down, flat area.
it's going to have
And they
multiple.
use quite a bit of trailers on that business.
Well, the other thing is the sidewalk to the, going to the south, you have drainage, you have a creek bottom and floodplain and,
Yes, there is a creek just to the south is probably, yes, that's correct. I think it's south, it is south of the site though, there, it is right.
yeah.
About half
I
a block to the
don't think
south.
anybody's going to be walking from the motel to the creek bottom, hopefully.
Mr. Chairman, I move to grant the variance.
Motion to approve the variance.
Second?
Have a motion and a second to approve the variance. All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
One day.
One nay. And that carries.
No,
I got one other thing.
Oh, wait a minute.
because there's only 9 of us. We don't,
It's not right.
Okay. It does not. We have to have a supermajority. Is that correct?
That's correct.
To clear it or to just to vote on it? I
That's
think you had to
correct.
have just a big
There
quorum.
has to be 9 affirmative votes to approve a variance.
It's still going to the commissioners.
That's correct. So the recommendation then will be not to approve it from this board,
Okay.
because you did not get 9 votes.
So it will still go to the city council.
Yes, I believe it'll be December.
I know. Yes. Yes, and I can tell you, I mentioned to Commissioner Waddell, we are going to look, at the next study session on December 4th, we have an ordinance that only requires 3/4 of the people that show up to consider this as we look at this. But it sounds like it moves forward now to the city commission.
There's just so many holes in this ordinance it's got to get cleaned up somewhere. Either you're assessing everybody instead of just assessing those that are making improvements, which is what you want. It's kind of not right, because it's never going to get complete at this rate. It'll be time to replace and repair by the time you ever get complete. So it's got to be reworked. It's
But
gotta have
in an
some stuff.
effort to make Enid more walkable, I think the goal is in the future, I can't speak for city
I don't think this
council.
is the way to do it. I think they need to put an assessment on the water bill and then take a designated area and pour that down through there with one crew.
I would suggest that probably, maybe Robert could answer this better, that in the future, this is probably not in the top 3 targets for extending the city's walk trail because of lack, I mean, we want to get people where they live and be able to let them walk to where they're working and where they shop. And we're in a very, there's no residential around here. We've got a couple of hotels and things like that. I know there are people that walk down in that area, but.
A lot of foot traffic.
And I think with the ordinance, I think with that new development, I see new development as Stonebridge or what we did where Academy is, stuff like this. I don't know any of us could go put our hand on what was actually done here to trigger this. As far as new development, I know, yes, it triggers permits and things, but I don't know that it follows the nature and intent of new development, at least by real estate standards, so.
What I would say and what I would ask is, you know, the person, or one of the people who are going to be looking to be able to look at this ordinance in and of itself is, you all see this before it hits the city council in any way, shape, or form, and any feedback, suggestions, input that you would have to put to the council to say what you think would work better in the situation would be highly valued. This is very much a hot button issue every time it comes across. Any type of information you all could put together and as far as suggestions would be very much appreciated, because this is something that is very, can be contentious, and I think everybody's intention is for it to meet the intent of what we want to make our city more walkable, livable for pedestrians and things, so.
Absolutely.
I think they need to rewrite it to where new development is sidewalks, and go ahead and pick out some areas that you guys feel important.
Yeah.
Like Oakwood Road. Don't even have a variance, it's just mandatory.
Can that not be a part of the next comp plan? I mean, where do you want sidewalks, where do you not? Where is the need? Make that be the need, instead of kind of just got this random, anybody that's doing improvements, they're getting hit with it.
Really, it just comes down to what does the city commission want to do? And so they're seeking input from you and really the public. I can tell you that staff has worked on probably 5 or 6 different variations of this over probably the past 6 years. And yes, it probably isn't quite right yet. I think on the residential side, it's pretty good because we rarely come and, I can't remember the last time we brought a residential one, but commercial ones like these 2 tonight, it's difficult to ask somebody to do this, but on the other hand, it's going to be difficult to ask them to do it wherever the city thinks it needs to be done, because one of you mentioned, well, maybe on Oakwood Road or someplace. That's fine if that's what the ordinance says, but then somebody could ask, why on Oakwood Road are you making me do it when you're not making me do it on South Van Buren? And if the city has a good answer for it, I suppose we can answer it, but we will definitely do our best. I think it's coming back to at least discuss some of it, and maybe we'll be discussing some more on the 4th. We realize it's a challenge, and we appreciate our citizenry being patient with us as we work on this. We'll keep working on it.
When will we expect this particular item to go to the city council?
December 4th should be.
Does it require a supermajority at that point as well?
I believe it does, but there it's 5. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
5 of the 7, yeah.
What is the right number?
Just a simple majority,
Oh, yeah, that's right.
So 4.
which might be the right standard for this body.
I do too. At this point, we've got to follow our rules. Commissioners, thank you very much for the discussion we've had here. I am ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion second to adjourn. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Those opposed? We're adjourned.
Thank you.